Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is the Sound of the Option Show for June 8th, 2014. And today, I'm your host, Richard Talk to Me Guy. Today's show is going to be slightly different, and you'll catch on soon with a few other comments. Many of you are familiar with the show, and each week we have many listeners. But even to our regular listeners, there are going to be some things you've never heard before. The topic of the show and the guest, who I'll introduce in a couple minutes, is here by popular request. There have been lots of questions and submissions, and we thought it was a good time to answer those questions. People ask about various, topics and categories, and this just seemed like the perfect opportunity to really get into those conversations, I'll call it. And for those of you listening over at Blog Talk Radio, you can also dial in and ask questions at 347-850-1407. And if you'd like to join the chat at Blog Talk Radio, you can do that by going to soundhealthoptions.com, click on the radio tab, and then choose Blog Talk Radio. And there is a link there to take you to the page where you can join chat and listen to the live stream there or join that chat. And also, for those of you that want to watch the live WebEx feed we do every week, where there's also a lively chat, you can again go to soundhealthoptions.com, click on the radio tab, and scroll down that page, and there are links that will take you to the WebEx feed, where we'll see the pages and some of the slide presentations that we'll be using today. I'm going to get right into it. I know there are going to be lots of questions, and there are lots of questions already, but let's just jump right in. The water's fine. Our guest today is Sherry Edwards. Sherry is well on her way to proving that at our core we are very sophisticated math-based robots. She states that we can be managed through our individual frequency-based signatures. She asks that we imagine a future in which we can be individually identified and maintained through the use of frequency-based biomarkers that keep us healthy and emotionally balanced. Her work at the Institute of Bioacoustic Biology has shown that we can each have dominion over those frequencies by individual mind management or a simple remote control that is completely programmable. Using the techniques of vocal profiling and evaluation, emotional as well as physiological issues can be revealed and addressed. Her work with the human voice reveals that people who share similar traumas, stresses, diseases, toxicities share similar, if not identical, vocal anomalies. She brings together ancient knowledge with modern ideas of harmonics and frequency relationship theories to show that math can be used as a form of predictive, diagnostic, and creative foundation for wellness. Through entrainment of the frequency grids of the brain, the body can be programmed to support its own optimal form and function. String theory proposes that infinitesimally small strings create our bodily structures, but doesn't answer the question of how this transformation occurs. The brain communicates using the language of frequency and has the ability to reveal individual DNA, RNA templates that have the potential to promote and extend life. Sherry's work provides many of these answers as to how these theories can be put to use to bring the truth to the surface about who we are, how we got here, and where we are going in terms of our intention and health. Is frequency our new medicine or an ancient mystery revealed? There have only been a few modern keepers of the Holy Grail mysteries. Sherry Edwards has been identified as one of the extraordinary beings who walk the earth to bring forth the secrets kept from mankind. Her work has helped identify the secret codes of life that add meaning and new dimensions to our existence. She is likely best known for her ability to bridge the gap between the ancient, the esoteric, and scientific realms of human evolution. I'll interject here. For those that are just hearing all this information for the first time, relax. By the end of this show, a lot of that will be clear. I know it sounds like, oh my God, what are we talking about? But really, It's pretty straightforward once you see some slides and hear some information. Now let's meet the Dean of the School of Sound Health Alternatives, the Director of the Institute of Bioacoustic Biology, and I am delighted to say my good friend, Sherry Eckberts. Good morning, Sherry.
Good morning, Richard. This is such a relief that we're doing this show because I get to reveal some things that maybe people haven't known, maybe don't want to know, that it will go down in history as how the world was changed.
It's really, for people that don't know, I've been doing radio shows with Sherry for a number of years. And it's always amazing. I mean, I learn something every show. And I've done a lot of shows with you. It's really amazing. You seem to have a great need to see that justice prevails. What makes you such a, and I say this endearingly, what makes you such a maniac about that?
I love that. I think it was it could be my own life here on Earth. And I saw so many unjust things that people had to go through. And I have this ability to see the motivation from a very early age, to see the motivation, hear the motivation, feel the motivation of why somebody was picking on somebody and bullying somebody. And I felt like, I can't really say I felt like it, I just knew that my purpose was justice and to see that everybody was treated equally, not just under man's law, which is very different from God's law, but I wanted them treated respectfully by God's measure, that we're all equal. So I don't have an answer, except that I'm driven to do it. It could be from past lives. I have one incredibly interesting past life regression with Dick Sutphen when he first started. And it explained so much to me that I was a young Jewish girl, young by I mean 13, 14 years old, and I had been given to this Nazi officer who was using me in a disrespectful way. And I couldn't understand why in school I hated Hitler. I hated the idea of Hitler. I couldn't hardly keep my thoughts on Hitler. I just had this irrational hate of Hitler. And so in this past life regression, they took me back to this time because it was something that was bothering me. And I also was very, very drawn to the alphabet, the Hebrew books, and just hearing it speak. And every time I would even look at the alphabet or hear it being spoken, I would cry. And I didn't understand that. And I was raised in Appalachia. We didn't go to church, much less know anything about a synagogue. I mean, it was just totally out of the realm of my experience in this lifetime. So during that, they finally figured out that that was my irrational hatred because I was this young girl. But there was a man there that I absolutely hated, and I identified him, recognized him in this lifetime. And going through this past life regression, I told him about it, and he started to remember. And I said to him, why, how could you do that to a young girl? And he said, don't you remember? One of us had to be the victim, and one of us had to be the perpetrator. And you could not tolerate the idea of hurting anyone, of being the perpetrator. So I voluntarily took that role. And together, we're teaching lessons about compassion. And so both of us started to look at how we hated Hitler or why. And we looked at Hitler at 30 years old and couldn't care about him, couldn't feel, couldn't touch it. And 10 and 5 and 3, and finally, when he was a newborn, we were able to care about him as another being and look into his face and his eyes. And from there, know that society created Hitler by their actions. And from that past life, I began to understand my empathy and compassion and need not to see anyone suffer. And from that moment on, I decided to take everything I had, everything I knew, and I don't consciously know everything I know. That's just bizarre for me, because somebody will ask me a question and I'll think, I don't know the answer to that. But then my mouth begins to answer, and a lot of the times it's profound. And I go write it down really quick because, I don't want to forget. But I'm open to some kind of channel, some kind of conduit to universal knowledge. And I want to share that. Does that answer it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That helps, sort of guide the, as I said facetiously, maniac, because you are really driven to want to talk about the truth. That's why we have a show that we do every week called Direction for Truth, because there is that segment. I mean, not only do you do amazing work with the voice and health conditions and imbalances and all sorts of things, but there's that other part of you where that's the part that I call the maniac, where you really want people to see that they have the tools they use using vocal profiling to get the truth themselves, but also you're really driven to get that out there. And
well, I think
that really gives a good background.
I think information dispels the fear. If you really know where you're going to or from, it's a lighter journey. And I only have this one really strange talent. That's all I've got to share. I don't have anything else, and I think that's going to help change the world. I hope it is.
I agree. You've talked. This is the perfect lead into this. That you've talked about, having some unusual abilities that helped you initiate the foundation of this work. Where do you think those abilities came from?
I could tell you a story and explain each one of them in earth terms, because I have. Okay, here's one earth term example. I had a near drowning experience when I was about 5, and there is an organ that is almost extinct and is certainly disconnected in humans, but it's open in dolphins, and it's called a sacculus, and that is open in me where it isn't in normal folks. And because it was open, my ear developed differently. And there's a bone in your ear, sort of like a little seashell kind of thing, that carries the mechanical sound to your ear into the brain. And that's why they think I hear differently, because my ear apparatus is mutated. Now I'm going to tell you the truth of what I think really has happened. I live in Appalachia, still do today, still on the same farm where I grew up, moved away temporarily. But my friend, my cousin, and I walked around in the woods. I loved the woods. The trees liked to talk to me, and I could hear what they were saying, and I felt at home there. But I always wanted to go to the highest point on the farm. And it was a big hill and had a big tractor road going to other fields. So we're walking in this place, my cousin and I, and we see something that is very silver and long, and it has, like, I would recognize it as a movie a motion picture, a holograph now, but I didn't know what it was at the moment, at the time, because we didn't have TV or radio or even electricity to have that kind of thing. So I took her hand, and she was reluctant, and I started toward it, but I don't remember ever getting there. The next thing I remember, I was holding her hand, and we were trying to walk down the side of this hill in this old rutted road, and we'd take a step, and boing, we'd be up over the trees with no gravity. And logically, and I'm 5 years old, and I'm thinking, boy, what if this goes away while we're up here? Long fall down. She called this thing on the side of this cylinder an argy. I didn't know what it was. And we tried to take our parents back, and it was gone. And they tried to tell us it was a weather balloon. But from that point forward, I started hearing the sounds. And people may think I'm kind of crazy. And that's okay. I'm a successful schizophrenic, if that's what's going on. But I could hear sounds from the side of people's heads. And I could interpret. I began to learn to interpret those sounds. Made people afraid of me, for one thing, and they just didn't want me around when they were having a conversation. But I always wondered about that, because that experience, because my eyes were blue before this happened, and now they're green, very green. I began to wear different size shoes on different days. I had allergies to milk one day and not the other. And nobody could explain that. I mean, I went to a 4-room schoolhouse. Nobody wanted to talk about it. My parents didn't want to hear about it. It was all, shut up, we don't want to deal with this. They recognized that I was different, but nobody wanted to know how this happened. So years later, as I was trying to fit into human groups, I wrote to Ruth Montgomery, and she wrote a book called Companions Along the Way. I can't remember, the Aliens Among Us was one of them. And she asked me to be in that book, but I refused. But she wrote this book about walk-ins, and when I read the book, I thought, that's it. There's 2 of us in here. The other guy didn't vacate. And I wrote her a very simple note to her publisher, not even to her, but to her publisher, and said, is it possible when a walk-in situation happens, and people call them wanderers today, but is it possible that the other guy didn't vacate? And Ruth Montgomery, within a few days, and I was in my early 20s at this point, within a few days wrote back to me and said, the psychologist, Sherry Edwards, now I was not a psychologist, but I was studying psychologist, when she was 6 years old, when she and her friend, now I wasn't 6, I was 5 when this happened, when she and her friend found the cigar-shaped cylinder in the woods. Now, Ruth Montgomery didn't have any way of knowing this. We'd never called it a cigar-shaped cylinder. How could she know this? And I looked her up, and she has this guy named Fletcher, and she was with the Washington Post in the Eisenhower era, and then turned to mediumship after several books. When she and her friend found this cigar-shaped cylinder in the woods, Sherry was then in touch with her astral family and agreed to share her life spreading the ideas of sound foundation, sound integrity. I can't quote the thing. It was about 10 paragraphs long on this little card in an envelope. And at that point, I just fell in the floor. I didn't want to be associated with little green man, do-do-do-do. I dropped out of psychology. I went into interpersonal communication. I couldn't stand the idea of not belonging here on earth. But the more we explore this, the more you look at Sylvia Frank's book about the Templars and the keepers of the Holy Grail, and she's identified me as one of those, and that explains a lot. But I feel and have this inordinate love of going straight up in a helicopter. I love helicopters. It feels to me like I'm going home. And we went for a Segway ride, and this is this little two-wheeled thing you see on TV, and you lean this way, and you go there, and you lean this way, and you go there. And I fell in love with those Segways, and they were like $6,000 or $7,000. And my husband bought me a used one that you had to turn this little crank to turn. And I had no interest in that Segway. I love the feel of bending this way, and you soar that way on your Segway, and it felt like home to me. And I have a lot of friends who have identified me as not particularly being human. One, because there's sometimes I forget the English language and don't know how to talk, because I think and talk in pictures. I guess that's not how humans think. Now, I have a human body. I have a fat, overweight human body. When my body is slender, skinny, I can't stay in it. I keep tumbling out. And until Sylvia Frank wrote that I was a keeper of the Holy Grail information and it had come down through genetics, I began to understand how a doctor can be with me and ask me about their patient. And I know things. There's no way that I know how I know. And I had hidden this for so many years because I didn't want people to think that I was a freak or an alien. But I'll tell you, people wouldn't recognize an alien if they were in front of them, because an alien would hide in exactly the kind of situation you would never suspect them. But everything that's happening with human bioacoustics and vocal profiling is here to elevate the human race to the point of freedom of their soul, freedom of being and integrity. Because what could we do? What could we accomplish if we didn't spend all of our energy on drama and hostility and depression and manipulation and spin and all those other things that we perceive as negative emotions, but we're right in the middle of them at the same time? So my wish for the world and what makes me feel clear and light is to bring out the best in everyone, for them to be who they are, for them to know who they are, for them to realize the hidden agendas that have been instilled in them and covered up. And I would like to bring forth the truth of them and who they are and their place, because everybody has a place in the universe and a job. Just like math in an equation, you have to have all the pieces in a math equation to make it work. And we have to have everybody working together to make this evolution of the human race expand and open and be real with each other and the animals and the trees and the planets, that we are all truly one from our cellular perspective. That why would I cut myself if those are my cells? And every cell is here for a purpose. Every atom is here for a purpose in making up your body and your organs. People are deliberately hurting themselves, and that pain pains me. I would like this to be a perfect world. And I know that we have to have bad to see good and stop to see go, but I would like to help bring that balance, that harmony back to the world.
Well, I think you want to, in my experience with you, is that you want to give people, the tools to have that opportunity. You want to give people choice.
Well, there was.
I think that's. I agree. I think that's all true what you're saying, and I think what you're really allowing people to do is to be empowered to have the choice of, oh, here's a possible way that I can take care of myself, or I can do something. If I'm not happy, here's how I can figure out why I'm not happy and what the imbalance might be, and here's something I might be able to do for myself to be able to be empowered to take care of that, or figure it out, or go forward.
There was a recent article within the last 6 months in National Geographic, and I think one of the practitioners or listeners turned me on to this article, but it was the last missing piece so that I can bring this forward. It said they have mapped the brain, and they've mapped the brain in little compartments, little cubicles, almost like we use the Rubik's Cube to represent health in some of the formulations that we look at. So in looking at each cube, there is a major frequency, and there are minor harmonics. And for those of you watching, I've put those harmonics up on the screen because I can see clearly that we are math-based entities, and we forgot how to run our own bodies. I don't know if it's from pressure or hunger or fear or what it is, or somebody else telling us we're not a good person or that they know better than we do. But these are the relationships of how our brain works and how our brain functions to create and monitor our emotions and our structure, our entire physiology, what's going on biochemically. And that was the last piece, because that's what I've been saying over and over and over. If you want to run the body, you have to speak to the brain. You have to engage the brain. And to do that, certain frequencies and certain frequency combinations equal this. Now, I had a lady try to beat me with a broom. She got in a few good because I said we are carbon-based robots that can be managed through sound. And we have put a whole sound system together of octaves and harmonics and color and sound and music. And all of these ratios that we're showing here, they're all in books about ratios and the planet and whatever else is going on. It's in our rainbows, in our color, in our music. We have created music in our image of how our brain works. We've created harmonics inside that music and how our DNA works. And I just happen to find a way to put it into perspective and into a computer program. And the way I understand it through my own hearing and my own brain, I put it into a program and hoped that other people could use it, and they can. We have trained thousands of people, and they catch on to it, and they can do it. And this is so ancient. Even before Pythagoras discovered these mathematical ratios of harmonics, people were using it to heal and cure through their voice, through flutes made out of bone, and it's there. We feel it through musical instruments, through all of the evidence. We've recreated our own biology in the things around us, but nobody has caught on quite until my ears put it together, because I hear so differently than other people. I think it's like Pythagoras. He reported being able to hear frequencies from people. So I guess there's people born into the planet every generation or so that can end up doing this. But we have taken it to the point where we can look at how all of this relates to the body in terms of keeping the body holy. WHOL, as in all the pieces are there, and holy, HOLY, that everything there cooperates with each other. That idea of holy being cooperating with God's plan or the entities, whoever created us. God must be a mathematician, but I have a kind of an odd description of what God is. I think everything is sentient, meaning it can think, even rocks, because it gives off a frequency, and turtles and water. You know, people didn't respect water enough. Water is the lifeblood of all things. When you look at humans, when you look at Mother Earth, and until Emoto's work, we didn't know that water had a consciousness and could give us back messages and can begin to communicate with us. And each part of the body has a frequency that it holds dear and channels, and we call that chakras. And it manifests from the brain and comes down through the spine and through these 100,000 miles of neurons in the brain into the body, into this neural network. And it's been mapped by the Chinese, but nobody knew how to control it. That's what we bring to the planet with human bioacoustics. But I readily acknowledge that that knowledge is, that information is much more than I've ever consciously learned. And I think it's incredible if you put everything in one pot that gives off a frequency from the movements of its atoms. That all in one pot is the matrix of math of how the universe is built. And a body is built on that matrix, as part of that matrix, as part of that harmonics, even down to our atoms. And that's how we connect, and that's how we prove that we're all alike, even down to a plastic dish. No, there's still atoms in there. That's how we all move together. We, because of my hearing, we just broke the codes. And that's what the people, our history, that needs to come out. Because somewhere we've had dominion over all that we are, and we just forgot. And I want to help people go back to that place.
And how did you, I want to jump in and go back slightly, or it will seem like we're going back slightly. How did you get from everything that you have said in terms of experience and hearing and your unusual skills and abilities to then getting into designing software? And this could be a long thing, so try and make it as brief as possible, because I know, I mean, that's a huge piece. Everything that you've said is amazing backstory, but how did you get from that to having this amazing, library of software to take, human frequencies? Because I know in your thinking it's all math, which always makes my eyes kind of cross. However, I know that that's really the truth. And what was that? Say that you went from who you are on the planet to, okay, now I'm going to make this into software. How did that happen?
Well, I used this ability, but I didn't know what was really going on. I remember in school once, and I was in the 5th grade, I think, 5th or 6th grade. And all of a sudden, I do this dive into the body, feet first, down through the head, and I'm sitting there in this wooden chair with this red and black, heavy, scratchy wool dress on, and the eyes are looking at this sentence about was and were in this notebook that you circle and fill out and whatever. And I was totally lost. I looked up and there's all these other people there. I looked to the teacher. She gave me back a signal, almost like we're communicating, just need to finish your work. But I forgot, I didn't know my multiplication tables. I didn't know what bus to get on to get home. It's like there was some exchange. And from that place on, I've been able to move out of the body and see what's really going on. And I graduated from college summa cum laude because I could pick up other people's thoughts and the teacher, and I could remember books and what page something was on. But I never explored that because I didn't know what it was, and I knew that it was bad. I knew that my family thought it was bad until there was a course that came up, Introduction to Parapsychology, at our college. And, now I'm going to get the answers. It was taught by a science teacher. And he taught the first 3 courses, and I taught the rest because he could explain the theory, but I could do it. And I taught there at the university different parapsychology courses for about 10 years or so. And not only was I teaching the course, I was learning about all of these different things. We went to visit Duke University. But as we studied things like tarot cards, and it was just an energy. It wasn't really the card. It was the energy. It wasn't really the runes. It was the energy. And there was nothing there to help people. So I opened a little store, and I called it Dimensional Resources. And I had herbs and tarot cards and books about astrology, and because nobody else in town would even touch it. Nobody even in town would even let me be on a radio show to talk about the course. And I got shot at that point because I was doing experiments in my front yard with a pyramid. And my kids were at home, and they bullseyed that top capstone to that pyramid. And all I was trying to do was see if it grew grass greener. So from Dimensional Resources, it grew and grew, and we called it Esoteric Unlimited because esoteric really means secret knowledge. Then it became Signature Soundworks because I figured out finally that I was doing it through people's voices. I went to see that voice guy, Edward, somebody who does your past life to your voice, and watch what he was doing. And I knew that the voice held information. I didn't know how to get it back out, but I knew it was in there and that somehow it was a manifestation of the brain. And so I started taking vocal prints. And okay, this looks unusual in this vocal graph. What does that mean? And then I would see the vocal graph in 3 or 4 people, and they all had the same issue. And we began to decode what was going on and why people's body were in a state of stress, in a state of dis-ease. And the more information we got, the more we were able to help people get well from things like leukemia and strokes and macular degeneration and brain trauma and malnutrition and broken bones. And they just begin to center themselves around databases. And we shared those databases with the very first people we were teaching how to do this because this was becoming a daunting job. And from there, we created the computer programs. And I joke with people I did that just out of pure laziness, so I didn't have to do all the work. And from there, this computer program led to this, and then led to us doing a project with the Army and led us working with doctors who couldn't figure out what was going on. And then we found this math matrix that answered the questions. Math is in every culture, every language. 1 and 1's 2. It's the consistency of all people. And I don't know if we created math or God was a mathematician, don't know. But it's just evolved. There's over 100 computer programs now. We give away a lot of them. When we see a need like radiation, people being exposed to radiation, we ask people to help us, like you're living on the Pacific Coast, and you helped us test the radiation frequencies. PTSD, I think, is another big one, and all this rigmarole with the VA and how they're not helping people. You know, for pennies, we can look at the diagnosis of what's going on with people through math. Through this matrix in the brain, it gives us clues as to what's really going on. Several doctors have called what we do, or called Sherry, me really, the doctor's doctor, because there's so many new things coming on. They can't figure out all of the layers. We did a big project on Parkinson's, and it wasn't Parkinson's. Well, some of it was, but it was Lyme's disease, and it was the reaction to tetanus shots, and you know, a lot of the ADD is really micro strokes for the kids, and reactions to vaccines and allergies and DPT shots that cause brittle bones. And the more data we put together, the more computer programs we could create, and the more computer programs, the more we could share with people and get people involved. And I did it all based on math and science, but I just think it's time for the backstory to come out. Did that answer your question?
Sort of. Yes, it did. Well, it's my own personal issue. I mean, in the sense of, as I say, when you talk about the program, I hear you talk a lot about math, and because math is such a weak point for me, it always makes my eyes cross when I watch you go down the rabbit hole of looking at a chart, looking at a vocal profile. And Sherry, the process for people that are new to this, the process that what will happen is Sherry will, or a practitioner will take somebody's vocal print, which just means a recording of their voice. Then that recording will be run through a piece of software that turns it into numbers that then can be run into any of these programs where they can look at the state of imbalance or what they're trying to figure out. And there's a lot of math in there. It always makes my eyes cross. I love the information, but the math is like, oh my God, how did you get there? And so that's such a huge piece of it, is you're taking something that sounds very esoteric. I mean that in a positive sense. You know, you hear things, you this, you that, but I mean, then you've taken that and masterfully translated it into a way that now others can do this. Because, I mean, when did you start actually making the software programs? Because up until that time, you were the only one able to do any of this. Is that true?
It is, and I think we made our first softwares maybe in 1995, but a question for you, Richard. When we do your nano voice, when whatever subject comes up and we use you as a guinea pig, and I say things and you think to yourself, there's no way she could have known that, and sometimes you share that with the audience. But if you ask me how I know that, can't I show it to you on your vocal print, how it's true and why it's true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the part that always blows my mind, is that, as I often say on air, that if people were to just hear you and not see the process of taking the voice in, taking the print in, looking at it through nano voice, which is, for people's information, a free program. That's a whole other conversation. Amazing free program. So that then that gives me information. If they were to just listen to you, you sound like a number of psychics and intuitives. I have a number of these people, because of what I do with radio and other recording stuff. I work with a lot of people who are intuitive, they're professional psychics, or that. And I could put you side by side, just having people listen to you, and you would sound like you were psychic. Now, the truth is that when you watch you do the process, you point to the numbers and you look at the numbers and the thing and the foundation, and you get much more actually foundational information because of that. And you look at the chart and you go, here, this note, your G sharp is this, and oh, your F sharp, oh, that's too bad about that. We'll talk about that for the show. And that kind of thing. I mean, it's always amazing, how you show the information, the imbalances or the states of how the numbers and the notes relate to each in terms of resonance or not. I mean, it's always right there in the vocal print, in the chart. It's amazing.
Well, think about David Oates' work in reverse speech. And I met David many years ago, and I was intrigued by what he was doing. He had a booth at a show. And well, explain this to me, David, because I'm intrigued. Well, he said, tell me something about your favorite number, but don't tell me what the number is. And I said, well, I don't think I want to talk to you about my favorite number. And he took that and slowed it down like 20% and played it backwards. And it said, 7 is my favorite number. And 7 is my favorite number, absolutely. So I think we hear the words left-brained, and most of us are left-brained because they taught us to write with our right hand. But I think we also pick up other information from our right brain, and somehow our consciousness comes up with a picture of a thought. And I think that's what psychic is, or how it's done. Psychic means knowing something you know, but not knowing how you know it. And it's real. It's, people argue with you, but we've done so many experiments. It's absolutely, positively real. So we find out how it is real, and then it's not psychic. It's science, and it's explainable. And I'm just doing it through the ears. Other people do it by the way you walk, or what your palm's structured, what's in your eye. I think whoever left us here, put us here, gave us all of these clues and codes so that we could fix ourselves, know ourselves, be ourselves. And I think we've lost the way somewhat. And I think I was just put here to help people remember, because it's all in there.
Well, and I think that, to me, one of the exciting things about your work is that it is software. It's something that, even though it came from esoteric foundations, it has its feet planted firmly in, you speak into the microphone, you take a vocal print, you run it through either nano voice, or you just take it directly into nano voice, or it's technology that allows us to see repeatable results. As read your bio, you find common anomalies in people that have states of what I'll call imbalance. And you've gathered an amazing library of data and references and research based on vocal, I don't know how many thousands of vocal profiles you've looked at, but you see commonalities. And eventually I see this as being more of the norm of people going, oh, of course this makes sense, because, here's that, and here's this, and here's this, 30 years of research.
Well, when you look at how people think, you can divide them up into fact, form, future, and feel. Now, feel and intuitive, we're looking at about 10% of the population. People who are futurists and can see where we're going, another 10% of the population. We look at the people who just deal with facts. Give me the facts. That's 40%. And you're rounding this off a bit. And another 40% says, show me. I was over here in this little 10%. And I knew unless I could satisfy the other future, form, and fact people, I was going to get nowhere. I was going to get no funding. I was going to get no backing. I was going to be here with 10% of the visionaries on the planet, and we were going to stay in our little package. Somebody had to step out and bridge that gap. And that's why I created these computer programs. That's why we give them away, to prove that information is in your voice. And you don't need me for an interpretation. You punch a few buttons and out blasts paragraphs of information about you, no matter what. Well, we want to keep it to one topic. We can talk about many topics, and it'll give you information from who you should be dating to what kind of job you should be doing to who you should be with. So it had to happen to integrate all the different kinds of thinkers. And again, that information just was provided from nowhere about where I need to go. I have some kind of open conduit to another place, and I can't understand it yet. But I think it's like if you move your hands really quick, you don't really see your fingers clear, or you see more fingers than one. And I think right here on this planet, there's a whole set of frequencies that we live by. But if we start to vibrate an object really, really fast, it disappears out of our sight, but our brain probably sees it. So I think there are different dimensions living together right here on Earth. People talk about extraterrestrials. I want to talk about extra-dimensionals or interdimensionals, that every place that you are, there's probably another piece of Earth from another frequency under your feet. Somehow, some people can pass through there to these other dimensions. And if I sit down and begin to move through that other dimension, my facial features change. My cheekbones rise, my eyes look different. I look like an old man. And moving through those dimensions is not scary for me, but it's scary for other people who are around you watching it happen. But I just kept quiet. No, that's an interesting piece of information from over there. I'll just bring this over to this set of dimensional people. And that's a lot of how all of this came together. Water in particular gives me access. I was born under Cancer, under a water sign. And that gives me access when I take a shower. And so I just bring it back because I don't want to scare people, but I want to support them. And I always thought if everybody knew all this stuff, I'd be in big trouble. Like the keynote, Richard. Every week we do a keynote, and there's one up for people that want to go look for it. That is the modern edition of astrology. They knew somehow that the frequencies of the planets and their movements had something to do with influencing people. So I just took it to a new level to what we look at in these computer programs and in this research, what gene that is, what toxin that is. Like this week, people's adrenals and their thyroid are in great stress, and the gene for heart attacks. And one of our employees just had a grandmother die. I don't know if she just had a stroke and was lingering. I don't know what was really wrong with her. But her aunt just died today of a heart attack. So in trying to do these keynotes and tell people what's coming up, then it's an early warning system of how their body, their brain is going to be influenced by these external frequencies coming at us. So it's
one of the things about the keynote for people that haven't heard this information before is that Sherry's languaging is that she calls it the keynote. However, there are other agencies like NASA and then certain other shorter named agencies that monitor it that don't get the, they're monitoring it because it's an eminence from the cosmos. I mean, it is actually a thing that occurs probably due to astronomical alignment. I'll say that. And there are other agencies and, people who monitor that sound or that acoustic. Sherry's software actually takes it and analyzes it and produces on a weekly basis. We talk about the keynote, and that's what she was just talking about. And it's an inclination of, it's kind of here's something that, could be under stress to be aware of. I mean, it's an amazing tool. and other people monitor it. I have no idea what they do with it because they probably don't have that, amazing background. And I know that, that sort of leads me to move into a couple of questions, and then I see that our time is running short already. Wow. You have done a lot of work with .gov, doctors, universities, people really do come from all over the world to study with you, and some of the, I know some of the names that have come and talked to you, but, don't like to talk about it because then they want to go out and pretend that they know what they're, that they invented the idea. And so how does that, is that what led to you having to have this, huge facility with classrooms, libraries, offices? I mean, you have a 9,000 square foot facility where you have classrooms and offices and hold conferences, and, is that your center of where all of this now is happening? And where people come from all over the world? I know you just had a conference where people came from all over the country to, talk about all of this and have a good time.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of work to do and a lot of people to reach. There's two types of marketing, top down, bottom up. Top down is the commercials the big pharma puts on there and says, you need this drug because, and it'll kill you because. That's top down. Go to your doctor, ask for this drug. And there's bottom up. And we didn't have any money. So I went to the masses, this hundreds monkey effect, and said, I want to train them. So even if the government comes in and begins to take this over, there'll be enough people here that know it, that it'll never die. Not again. And people are posting that they're having trouble hearing this. This is going to be up on our archives that are is on the front page of our website, soundhealthoptions.com. So you'll be able to listen to it and guide people to it. But at this point, Richard, I don't even remember your question.
Oh, it was the, how that I was talking about. You work with everything from, government to doctors to everybody that come from all over the, you have this, that led to this center that you have, this, facility that you have in Ohio where people come visit. And I was just asking about, was that sort of, I think it's the chicken and the egg that you need a facility where people could come from all over the world, you could meet, you could have conferences. And do your research. If that's what you were starting to say, is that there's a lot of work to be done. You have people that are working on this constantly and learning and figuring and finding new ways of figuring things out. I know you did some interesting work on I would call it weight loss, but it really isn't that. I mean, can you talk about that just a little bit?
We can. We found out through looking at people who were overweight that it was not about the food they eat or a lack of exercise. It was really about body metabolism. And so we have put together what we call the ultimate diet, which brings in the liver and cholesterol and genetics but majorly the metabolism of leptin, ghrelin, adiponectin, to really look at why people are not losing weight, because it's not one thing fits all. And I think with 65% of people overweight, that this really needed to happen. And so we're training people to go out and put these bioacoustic weight management centers in their community. And a lot of times we start with training them for free and giving them the software for free. The 2-day class we just did, several people from all around the world joined us online to learn about this, and they didn't have to leave their home. And they got the software and the textbooks, and they had to buy a microphone. But people are so depleted right now of money, of initiative, of resources and tools to support themselves, that we knew we had to step forward and say, we want to help. And we are a nonprofit, both literally and figuratively, and we give away as much as we can, and we accept donations to help people go to class. Most of the donations we get are from people who have been here and we helped them support their own optimal form and function, and they got well, and they said, I want other people to be trained, and they'll give us grants. There's a lot of information flying by on WebEx. We could probably make this PowerPoint available to all of you on Blog Talk Radio who want to see it. And it's information about waves and harmonics and Pythagoras and how all this
I really do have to suggest to listeners on Blog Talk Radio that I know probably by late tomorrow or Tuesday at the latest, Marie will have this posted for replay. I'm seeing some of the slides that Sherry is flying through. I'm getting distracted occasionally by looking at the PowerPoint flying by. It's, great information, giving some different perspectives on how sound have effect. Water is such a great example on how, and I thought we would actually do a show once where I would not use the word fracking, but I can't help myself. It pisses me off so much that we are doing this to something so precious as water. Water is such a powerful vehicle for benefit for everything on the planet. And there is, this is one of my old phrases is, Cleopatra's bathwater. There is no new water. This is it. This is the same water that Cleopatra bathed in. This is all we got. And yet we seem to think that, fracking is, how can that even be allowed? Water is precious. It's the blood of the planet.
And it's causing, it's causing so much damage. And people just they don't want to realize it because they want the money.
Absolutely.
And so they're lying.
Yeah. Bestly, please see us on the Direction for Truth show where we both rant a little more. I rant a lot more.
Yes.
You do give I want to clarify this for people to understand. It's not that you're philanthropic when you give things away. It's because you're, back to being a maniac. And I mean, again, that in an endearing way. You really want people to have this information. You want people to have access to this. I mean, you really give a lot away, like the Nano Voice application that you're talking about, that people can download for free. Or they can go now to soundonadopters.com and go to downloads and download Nano Voice, and there's a manual and everything, and you could be running this on your, computer by after the show. And it's easy to use. You need a microphone. That's all you need.
Sometimes
you give a lot away.
Well, sometimes I give so much away I have to go borrow money to meet payroll. We have a great staff, but I can't ask them to work for free. I work for free because I have Social Security, which is nothing, but, I try to get along with it. But we want everybody to have access, and we'll help you all that we can get started. But there are some people that just want me to give it all. And they say if I really cared about them, I would give them tone boxes and I'd give them this and this. How do they think I'm going to pay for this? That's a problem. We need more donations, and I hate asking for money. I think it's despicable. But every penny that we get as a donation goes out to somebody else who deserves to be able to take this course and take it to their community. So thanks for bringing all of this up, because we really do help a lot of people.
You really do. And can we, again, I know we're going to have to wrap up pretty soon. Can you talk briefly about one of my favorite groups that's a very powerful organization, the Guardians? I think that's such a great ability for people who want to learn more and use some things to help their own community and their own family members and themselves. I think Guardians is such a great, great part of Sound Health Options.
Well, my own intuition, or whatever you want to call it, told me that there's going to come a time soon when we would be taken over either by the government as something that dealt with domestic terrorism, and that we needed to put together an underground group So we have a Guardian network, and people don't like that name, Guardian, but I really do see it as drawing the line between what will allow the government and other entities from federal to state to whatever to interfere in our lives. So every month we meet, we give another software and a 2-hour explanation of how to use the software. It's $40 a month to pay for that software. It helps us keep going. And I think when or if the government ever comes in and decides to shut us down, that network of people will be protected. Now, we have some very smart lawyers volunteering their time and working with us, and we have put this together in a way that we went to the government first and said, this is what we can do. And they said, go away, you're not medical. But there's a couple of things that I'm setting on I think the government is very interested in, and I also think they recognize that something in my brain is extra, and there's things that I'm coming up with that they could really use. One of them is the perception of time. We have a set of frequencies that if we put in a room with people, their perception of time is changed. And we can change their biochemistry, and we found the biochemistry of time inside this math matrix. Now, how valuable is that? We are able to look at things that nobody else can see through these computer programs, and we teach everybody to do it. For instance, in one of our programs about the heart, there's a biochemical called troponin that says there's damage to your heart muscle. We had a doctor come in, he'd just been in an accident, crushed his hand, the airbag crushed his hand, and they needed him to get full flexure from his hand again. We'd helped him with many other things. This is a local hospital here. And I hear you, Richard, hurry. And so we were able to get his hands back up and running in about 20 minutes, and it's on YouTube and Vimeo. But the computer says you need to pay attention to this troponin because there's a problem with the heart. He and his wife both were in this accident. We tested her too. Both Dr. Rudy and his wife Karen had troponin. The doctors at the emergency room had missed it, but the math-based computer program found it. And we can look at proteins and genes and toxins. We can look at whatever is going on in your body. We see people in our clinic, but most of all, we want to train you to do it, to take it to your community so that when healthcare becomes so expensive, it's just absolutely off the charts for them and they can't afford it, they can come to you, and for a minimal fee of probably $50 to $100, you can give them the answers. That's the dream, the goal, and that's what keeps me going because I think it's possible.
I agree, and that's why I'm very enthusiastic about, as I say, the Guardians in particular, because it's a 2-hour session once a month. It's jam-packed with information. I will warn people that anytime you're on a webinar with Sherry, it's jam-packed with information. It happens. But it's always recorded, so we can go back and review, because she just has so much, information at her fingertips, or some part, I'm not sure where, located, that but the Guardians is such a great thing. I mean, whether it was allergies or radiation or, whatever the causes are, to be able to then take that back, or, allergies, and to take that back and work with your, yourself and your family members and the people in your community, or even start a private, a small practice on the side, where you're helping people see some information and getting some reports that, here's an actual report with states and imbalances. It's very cool. And it's very, I use the term thing, to be able to actually have this information and go, oh, look, and then adjust that and then retest yourself and go, oh, that's better now. Wow, how cool is that? I love that.
For those of you who are looking at WebEx, you're seeing movement equals form. This is a little machine that you can change the frequency, and you can see that it's changing into the form of DNA. So sound equals form, sound equals emotion. And Steve is saying perhaps this is why some music is timeless, might use these frequencies. Yes, the classical music that is timeless follows the math principles of add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It's a beautiful thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to watch your DNA get created. And what you can be and do, have dominion over what's going on with your family. Be predictive and see when there's a heart attack that's coming. Use the keynotes and see when the certain kinds of stresses are coming. This is an early warning system that we can use to drive us toward a certain piece of information so that our outcomes become supportive of what's going on. That idea of tension and release in a song, tension and release in a movie, in a theater, that's the same thing that we're doing with your body. We are entraining your brain to give us information. And we have created the books and the texts on the information. And a lot of it's out there. Different people have taken the courses and decided they could do it bigger, better, faster, cheaper than we could. We're the fountain. We're the fountain of information.
This is great. I'm getting distracted again watching the slides because this is a great PowerPoint presentation. It's got amazingly great visuals and just a tremendous amount of information. I look forward to seeing that up on the site. I really am sorry to say that I think we're at the point where I have to ask you, how do people get in touch to take classes or get their vocal print evaluated, or, how do they get in contact with you? How do they find you? SoundHealthOptions.com. Lots of links there for articles and classes. We just did a 2-day class about allergies, methylation, mapping, which is the first course that we're going to do on diet and metabolism. People were allowed to take this 2-day course for free. We provided them the software, the class, the textbook. We also are encouraging them to teach this to other people, and we have a marketing class and a teacher training class that they can attend for free and begin to support their community and themselves. The 5-day class is coming up, and I wanted to show what you get with that 5-day class. There is a picture here, a microphone, headphones, a tone box, a calculator, videos, audios, books, materials, charts. The textbook alone is 600 pages. Richard, you've taken this class. It is chock full. It is jam-packed. It's beyond chocked. It's way up into jam-packed full. It's 5 days of, mind-bending information in a very positive sense, but it is packed with information.
There's a place here, info and frequently asked questions. We do projects all the time. We're doing one on marijuana, if anybody wants to join us with that. My project at the moment is creating the software that will allow us to travel to other planets without losing bone mass or muscle strength. So for everything from crops to your health to interplanetary space. And then, Richard, they wouldn't have to kill us off and call us useless eaters, because we could move over there to a Triton or something. So hope for the world now and in the future. That's what it's about.
It's an amazing thing. As I say, for people who haven't heard any of this before, it's really, I'm a guy who stands behind a microphone for a living. I met Sherry. Actually, Sherry and I haven't actually met in person. Well, I think we did once a long time ago at a show. But I've been, working with Sherry as a co-host for a number of years, and it's always, each time I learn something new. It always amazes me. It's always fun. I call you, a valued friend.
Thank you, Richard. That is so sweet. There is so much to share. We need teachers and trainers above all else to help get this information out to every country on the planet. So please, if you're interested in taking our courses, just write to me. Just my name, Sharry Edwards, Sharry with an A, S-H-A-R-R-Y. You can join us in classes. We'll find a way to help. And then you can see some of the relationships and some of the things that we've been able to do. This is about somebody who couldn't talk. And we were able to take several people and look at the commonalities and then into the literature. And we were able to provide pieces of missing information. This is the medicine of the future. Bioacoustically speaking, we're going to change the world. And we hope all of you want to become a part of that.
I think it's an amazing, amazing technology. I recommend it highly. All right, everybody. I'm sorry to say we must stop. I know how this could go on for quite some time. Still, there's so much information. This has been really great, Sharry, and thank you so much for what you do. And thank you, everybody. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon, I'm certain. See you next week, and I believe we have a show on Tuesday afternoon as well.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
And now people know where it really came from.
Exactly. All right. Thanks again, Sharry. Bye.
We'll see you on Tuesday.